Well, for about 14 years, it looked like the serial pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, it looked like he would get away with a mere slap on the wrist. But then one little tweet changed it all. And we're going to talk about that with a whole lot more on this, the part 3 of Jeffrey Epstein, The Real Tragedy. And it's what some people are calling, as far as our podcast is, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show, and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster nor Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. So glad to have you as a part of the crime train today. We always like to invite you, if you're a new listener or even you're a seasoned listener, we like to invite you to reach out with a shout out. You can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And by the way, if you'd like to reach out with a shout out, you can ask questions. You can make suggestions about maybe some coming podcasts that you'd like to see us cover. Or you can even lodge objections. You can even disagree with some of the things we say. It's always a safe spot. So take advantage. Reach out with that shout out. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. If you would like to support the program, we always love people who help support us. You can become a badge supporter, BADGE, and you can read all about that by going over to peacemakernetwork.com, peacemakernetwork.com. There you can read about how we support the brave men and women of law enforcement, the first responders, and the brave folks of the military. I always call those folks the folks that run toward danger instead of away from danger. And for as little as $3 a month, you can become a badge supporter. So check that out if you would. If you'd like to get caught up on past episodes, some of you are new to Charlie Crimebuster, and you'd like to see some of the series that we've done, and we've covered a ton of crime, then go on over to charliecrimebuster.com. You can see our episodes there, or you can just go on your social platform, wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll probably see a whole bunch of Charlie Crimebuster right there and get caught up. By the way, we are doing part 3 now of Jeffrey Epstein, The Real Tragedy. So again, if you would like to reach out with a shout out, you like to support the program or get caught up, we're going to put all those links in the show notes, so all you got to do is just reach over there and click. Okay, now to our main focus. If you're just joining us, this series, we're in part 3. Part 1, we shared with you how the district attorney tanked the case. In part 2, among other things, we shared with you how the federal prosecutor blew up the case. He did that with, that so-called quote-unquote sweetheart deal. And, it looked like that this jerk was going to get away with a mere simple sentence. And he was going to serve that sentence in quote-unquote what I call a glamour slammer. But then something happened. Now, if you'd like to get back to those 2 podcasts, again, you can check your own podcast platform or go to charliecrimebuster.com. But to get everybody on the same page on this episode, I thought we ought to probably go back and look at a little timeline of the case so that you can kind of know what brought us to this place. And it all started out January the 20th, 1953. That's when Jeffrey Epstein was born. And he was born in Brooklyn, New York. Nothing really stood out as I researched his childhood other than the fact he was a little bit chubby, was a nerd type of guy. He would actually tutor other students. And he played the piano. And apparently was a whiz kid in math. I was going to tell you he's probably a smart guy, but he wasn't very smart for what he did later in his life. But then in the summer of 1974, now he begins to teach physics math classes at Dalton School in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And if you recall, I told you one interesting tidbit about that was that he was actually teaching without a college degree. Don't know how he got there, but he did. But while he was there at this school, he meets what I call friends in high places. You've heard of Garth Brooks singing about friends in low places. Well, Jeffrey Epstein met friends in high places, and he connected with a student's father, a guy by the name of Alan Greenberg. Bet you heard of him. He was the chief executive officer of Bear Stearns, the financial powerhouse. In 1976 to 1981, well, Epstein, then he leaves teaching, and he rises through the ranks there at Bear Stearns. First a trader, then he was a limited partner. In 1981, he founded International Assets Group. This was his own consulting firm, and soon they attracted several very wealthy international clients. Even Victoria's Secret's head guy, he was part of Epstein's investment group. In the 2000s, well, Epstein, now he begins to invest millions of dollars into various funds. You can see how he made his money, including $57 million into Bear Stearns' high-grade structured credit strategy, enhanced leverage. Well, just to boil it down, he's making tons of money off other people's money. So we got this rich man who seems to think, I guess, with all of his money, that he can just about do anything he wants to do. And also, let me point out, by this time, Maxwell has joined him, his girlfriend Maxwell. Then in 2005, the dark clouds begin to roll. There was a 14-year-old girl. She became the earliest underage victim. Now, when I say earliest, the earliest one to formally accuse Epstein of molestation. And she talked about an incident that happened at his Palm Beach mansion. Now, according to investigators, this girl, well, she was brought from her high school by another teenager to give Epstein a massage in exchange for money. Now, remember, if you've been keeping up with it, which, as we shared in the past episode, massage, that's just a code word for sexual abuse of an underage minor. So now, this happened in 2005, and in May 2006, well, the police department there in Palm Beach went to work. They did some good investigation, and they charged him with multiple counts of unlawful sex acts with a minor. And this is a state attorney by the name of Barry Kishner. He turned around, and I don't know why, for some reason, I believe that Kishner tanked the case. Because of all of that evidence and all those victims, he only sends one victim before the grand jury. He kicks it over to the grand jury. It kind of takes the responsibility off of his shoulders, way for him to kind of get out of the pressure, I guess. So he sends a young 14-year-old girl there, and she makes a presentation to the grand jury. Keep in mind that she also is there with some attorneys that aren't too friendly to her. Now, that grand jury, that was in June 2006, they heard from only one accuser, and they did return an indictment. But now get this, for one count of solicitation of prostitution. That's just like being a mere John, Now, there are other accusations from other victims, including minors, but none of those are reflected in the decision of the grand jury. So it looks like, well, he's getting off of it. But then, the FBI. Now, we've already had the Palm Beach Police Department investigated, but now the FBI opens a federal investigation that involves multiple accusers in Florida, New York, and other places in the United States. And then we go to summer of 2007. Investigators are working toward an indictment, but then comes the rich lawyers, Epstein's legal team, and they begin to negotiate a plea deal. This is in 2007. With then U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, and that's here in Florida, in Miami. And then there comes that sweetheart deal that I told you about in our last episode. After more of a year of investigation, bargaining between the two legal sides, well, Epstein shows up in court again, and he does plead guilty. But get this, all those charges, and he simply pleads guilty to one count. One count of solicitation of prostitution, one count of solicitation of prostitution of a minor under the age of 18. Well, those charges are very light compared to what he's done. He's given a sentence of 18 months in jail, plus a year of community service, and he's supposed to register as a sex offender. And we told you all about the Glamour Slammer in the last episode. If you need to get caught up, going over to charliecrimebuster.com, you can get caught up. Epstein, he's given an early release from jail. He never serves time in any federal prison where he ought to be. November 2011, he registers as a level 3 sex offender. That's one in which, quote, unquote, a high risk of repeat offense and as a threat to the public safety exists. However, even then, for some reason, I guess he bought off some attorneys, and they tried to appeal that to a lower registration. Now, along the same time that Epstein's getting away with this sweetheart deal, in February the 16th of 2017, no, it's a few years from there, but this federal attorney, prosecutor, Alexander Acosta, who did that sweetheart deal, well, amazingly, President Donald Trump announces that he is his nominee for U.S. Labor Secretary. So, a lot of people doing good. Epstein, he gets, mere slap on the wrist, goes to the Glamour Slammer, plays around with justice a little bit. Alexander Acosta, the guy who negotiated that sweetheart deal, well, he becomes the U.S. Labor Secretary. But then in 2018, around that time, some of these people begin to do some civil lawsuits. And then, to everybody's amazement, in February of 2019, a judge rules that U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, that he did violate the Crime Victims' Rights Act, get this, by not informing Epstein's victims about that sweetheart plea deal in Florida that was 11 years earlier. So now everything changes. And there's something else that happens that makes all this come to be. Something else that happens that even gets Epstein arrested. And we're going to tell you all about that in a moment. But right now, it's time for what we call our Crazy Crook Story of the Week. Every week we try to tell a crazy story, kind of lighten the load of some of the dark things that we share. So here's Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook Story of the Week. Our Crazy Crook Story today, well, it comes to us from Atlanta, Georgia, the Peach State again. And this was a would-be crook, and he actually strolled into Atlanta salon, a nail salon there, and he loudly yelled out and demanded everybody's money. But get this, he left none the richer, yep, because the customers, the workers, they just brushed him aside. That's right, can't make it up. It was a failed robbery at Nail First. It was captured, actually, on surveillance footage. And this was shared by the Atlanta police with the hopes of finding out who this wannabe thief is. He came into the salon and he yelled, "Everybody get down, give me all your money, empty out your pockets." He yells at 3 women sitting up front after he walks through the door. That's according to the video. But these women, they just casually ignore him. He walked over to a worker who calmly just answered the business phone during the deal. "Where's the money?" the suspect asked the man on the phone, and that guy doesn't even bat an eye. And so this would-be robber walks away. But then I guess he decides he's going to try it again. He says, "Surely they didn't understand me." So he reappears, and then again, here's his next demands. He demands it of one woman. She stood up. "Give me the money. Where's the money?" This persistent thief, but yet ineffective, suspect says again. The woman backs out of the door, tells him she doesn't have anything. After she steps outside, well, then the man, he kind of looks around, embarrassed. He heads for the exit. He did approach that woman outside one last time, but then again, she walked away too. So this would-be robber, who was ignored, and walked away with empty pockets, he does indeed become Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. All right, now back to our main focus. So what was it? You see, for a while, it seemed like that this crook wasn't the only one ignored. It seemed like that Jeffrey Epstein had been ignored largely for all of his serial sexual abuse of minor children. But then something happened. It's called the Me Too movement. You know, this was an awareness movement around the issue of sexual harassment, sexual abuse of women in the workplace. It kind of grew to prominence in 2017, and that was it actually was in response to news reports of sexual abuse by another powerful rich man by the name of Harvey Weinstein. Now, it was in 2006 that a lady by the name of Tarina Burke, she coined the phrase Me Too as a way to help women who had survived sexual violence. So then, fast forward more than 10 years, and that phrase of Me Too, well, it literally exploded as the slogan for the anti-sexual harassment movement. And that movement, my friend, has rocked some of the most powerful men in entertainment and politics. You see, now, while that phrase had been a lexicon for more than a decade, it was a tweet by an American actress, Alyssa Milano, that sparked a social media phenomenon. And it did raise awareness, and it did give voice to survivors, and it did lead to sweeping culture and workplace changes. Now, it is Milano's tweet that's largely recognized as a tipping point for the modern Me Too movement. Again, it wasn't the origin of the phrase. It happened 10 years earlier. But it was this tweet, my friend, that brought everything to prominence and went viral. You know, it's amazing how some things go viral and some things don't. Well, this Me Too tweet went viral. And while, Burke gets credit for the origin of the Me Too, it was that phrase, no doubt, by the actress that really made it effective. And within hours of Milano's tweet on October the 15th, 2017, well, thousands, tens of thousands, actually, of people replied to her call of action. And within just 24 hours now, get this, within 24 hours of this tweet of Me Too, people all identifying as being victims, Facebook reported more, now hold on to your hat, more than 12 million reactions connected to Me Too within 24 hours. That following year, well, that tweet, Me Too, tweeted an average of 55,319 times a day. Not a year, a day. Now, amazingly enough, the actress, she was somewhat uncomfortable when she saw that phrase go viral and realized that, she didn't really originate with it. She worried that communities of color would feel excluded from the movement because at first that tweet seemed to be centered on white women in Hollywood. But Milano, she quickly gave credit to Burke for the phrase, said she was unaware of the history, and then the two women often appeared together in interviews, and both of them, both the original person who came up with Me Too and the person who tweeted, they pretty well became the public faces of the movement. So that movement led to changes in the workplace, society, and it was also this culture that brought an understanding that was ready to put people like Epstein accountable. And he was no longer able to use his money, his power. No matter how much he paid his attorneys, he could not get them to save him this time from justice. But when it comes to Epstein, the tweet wasn't the only thing that put pressure on the authorities. And I'm going to tell you what else happened that turned this case around on its head. But now, it is time for what we call our Scam Alert of the Week. Here's James Buckland with this week's Scam Alert.
Thank you, Charlie Crimebuster. This week's Scam Alert comes from Aura.com, AURA.com. Has to do with student loan forgiveness scams. You see, whenever a government relief program hits the headlines, scammers get to work. One of the most highly publicized relief initiatives in the past year, to which the scammers have obviously flocked, has been President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. And here's how the scam works. The scammers communicate by way of phone or by email. They use generic business names that sound trustworthy, and they pose as federal loan servicers and set up a phony website that also looks official. They might even offer services from loan consolidation help to loan forgiveness, and they claim that they can speed up the loan repayment process or even lower your monthly payments for a fee. Actually, one recent victim lost $600 to a scam like this. Here's something else. If a target falls for the fraudulent offer, they unwittingly disclose sensitive information to a criminal, including details like your social security number, IDs, financial information, or whatever else the scammer requests on their fake application or their fake website. So here's how to stay safe. Avoid speaking with anyone. Avoid speaking to anyone who contacts you claiming to be your loan servicer. Instead, hang up the phone and contact your loan servicer directly using the contact number from your billing statement, the provider's official website, or your own address book. At Charlie Crimebuster, we strive to keep you safe.
Thank you, James, for that scam alert. Well, it seems like that the authorities now are alerted that the culture has all changed and they can't continue to just sweep stuff under the rug. But it was not just social media that brought that push that led authorities to Epstein. It was also good old-fashioned reporting of the press that had a tremendous results in changing the culture for sexual abusers, those who particularly hid behind their power and the money. And there was an investigative journalist for the Miami Herald, a lady by the name of Julie Brown. At first, she just expected to spend a week on the same emotionally brutal endeavor that she had actually worked for more than 2 years. That is, interviewing women who say that as girls, underage girls, they were part of a sex ring run by the wealthy financier Jeffrey Epstein. So she did. She worked hard, and she published and researched a series of articles about a secret plea deal engineered by a current member of President Trump's cabinet that helped Jeffrey Epstein evade federal charges relating to those ladies' accusations. Now, her work identified some 80. Earlier we were telling you there was over 30, but now she had identified some 80 alleged victims, and she also, of course, was rewarded for her reporting, including a George Polk Award in the category of justice reporting. Now, all during this time, old Jeffrey Epstein, well, he moved about freely, built a new compound in the Virgin Islands. And all during this time, Mrs. Brown, well, she continued to dig. And then she got enough documentation, actually, she said, to fill a spare bedroom in her Florida home. And then things changed. It changed when all of this pressure from the press, social media, it all changed when Mr. Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, was arrested at an airport in New Jersey after flying in from Paris on his private jet. Now, the Daily Beast and other news outlets, it reported that he faced sex trafficking charges. And then law enforcement, well, they then forced their way into that 21,000 square foot mansion in Manhattan. There they found hundreds of photos, partially nude women and girls. Now, the charges which federal prosecutors unsealed, well, it accused Epstein, 66, of having a vast network of underage victims, including girls as young as 14 years of age. And Miss Brown's articles, well, collected under the title of Justice, well, they resurfaced again on social media. You see, my friend, that's what happens when a reporter refuses to give up on a story. A tweet and a newspaper set the stage for the arrest of this serial abuser of minors. But he wasn't responsible alone. There was somebody else involved. You see, now it's time for us to talk about Jeff's partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell. We could actually do an entire series on that woman. She was the center of the sexual trap that kept bringing young girls for Jeffrey to abuse. Now, she and Jeffrey had a rather twisted, perverted relationship. No doubt they cared for each other a great deal. She would do anything for him, and in his sweetheart deal that they negotiated, well, he insisted on immunity for her during that part of this sad story. Now, at one time, those close to her, well, they told about her love for Jeffrey. How she said, now get this, that his sexual appetite was more than she could fulfill. How that led her to go out and procure, I say a more realistic term is lure, young women to Jeffrey on the pretense of just giving a massage. Then Jeffrey would abuse them, rape so many young girls. We reported that earlier, at least 80 victims. Now Maxwell first thought she could skate these charges herself. She had actually distanced herself from Jeffrey, attempted to turn the tables around and get some good PR for a change, and she worked with charity, including Saving the Ocean. But quite frankly, my friend, she should have been more concerned about saving young girls from sexual abuse than saving the ocean. And she was once quoted by saying to a friend said that the women she brought to Jeffrey were nothing. She treated them as mere trash. They were served a purpose, and then they were just thrown away. That was, my friend, until they began to fight back. And when the justice system failed them regarding criminal results, well, they went after her in civil court. And they went after the man who she willingly broke the law for in bringing young underage women to Jeffrey. So when Jeffrey took the easy way out and hung himself in a New York jail, she became the focus of the investigation, and she was found guilty of sex trafficking. And now, as you know, the rest of the story, she's in prison, working, of course, to appeal her sentence. So there it is, my friend, the real tragedy of Jeffrey Epstein. That is, the victim of these two abusers. Now, just before I leave, I've got to take just a moment to address the fact that some people have been writing about, and that is that these victims are being awarded money for their suffering and abuse. In fact, some of them millions of dollars. Well, while all of us may not agree with that, in my opinion, my friend, they deserve every penny of it. They were abused and raped, not only by this evil man and this evil woman. They, my friend, were abused by the state government that failed to protect them way back then and to give them justice. And then not only were they abused by the state government that failed to really go after Jeffrey, they were also abused by the federal government that failed to do the same. The federal government that gave him that sweetheart deal that landed him first in the Glamour Slammer. And these girls were treated badly. They were called names. They were ignored. And all of them were very vulnerable to this sexual abuser. So I say, more power to them. Whatever money they got, they deserve. I don't know. You may disagree. Reach out. Well, shout out. Charlie Crimebuster, gmail.com. Charlie Crimebuster, gmail.com. Love to hear from you. And if you want to get caught up, going over to charliecrimebuster.com. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster here saying be alert, be safe. Yeah, be safe, because the life you save, it may be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. If you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.